Welcome to Getting the Job, your guide to the hiring process. In this video, you will hear from human resources professionals providing insights into the hiring process with tips on how to secure a job. Joining us is Rhonda Bell of the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services, April Gibson of Puget Sound Orthopedics, Lisa Arbakauskas with REI, and Dennis Loney with Workplace Innovations, LLC. Moderating our discussion is Mike Hudson with the Association of Washington Business Institute.
Well, you're looking, you're looking to start a relationship, and possibly a long-term relationship, hopefully, and to do that in a half hour or 45 minutes or something is pretty difficult. So I think the message to job seekers is understand that employers are trying to get a sense of what type of person you're going to be and answer that question that can't be asked. What kind of an employee is this person going to be? So,
yeah, I think the other thing too is that I think the type of interviews that I consider the nightmare interviews are the people that come in so prepared with canned answers to questions. And regardless of the question you ask, they're going to give the answer that they prepared for. And you never get a sense of who they are. I mean, you don't know if it's margarine or butter. I mean, you have no idea who they are. And I think that my best advice to anyone is one of the most important things is know yourself very well in relationship to that job so that you can just talk about it. And don't be afraid to identify your shortcomings. You know, I mean, I think all of us can agree that when you ask someone about weaknesses, whether you ask it in that way or through another way, the last thing you want to hear is, "Oh, my biggest weakness is I spend too much money on my boss's birthday present." I mean, you really do want to hear something that demonstrates to you that they know themselves and they know their own limitations and they know what they don't do well. But that they're also doing something to work on it, you know, that they have that self-awareness.
Oh, that's so critical.
Yeah.
Self-awareness, I think, is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
And very lacking.
And very lacking.
Very lacking.
But if people can demonstrate that at the interview just by being themselves and demonstrating that self-awareness, boy, that sells me very easily.
It does, and you feel like you got an authentic representation of who that person's going to be,
Yes.
and not, I do recommend often for people that are nervous going into an interview or trying to prepare that they take some time to think about the questions that they might ask and look at the job description and think of how they could, what examples would be relevant to show that they've done the sort of things that description says that they're looking for. And write up some notes of things that you want to talk about and maybe run through some practice scenarios with someone, but don't hold so rigid to that you're losing your sense of self and authenticity in that conversation. Notes can be fine, and being prepared and putting some thought to it is a really good thing that'll help you once you get into the situation, or having a couple examples that you think are highlights of who you are and what you've done to bring into it is great, but make sure they're relevant to the question that's being asked of you, because if they're not, you didn't do yourself a service by sharing them.
how important is persistence?
It's a fine line between persistence and nag.
And obnoxious, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a fine line.
Yeah.
It's follow-up note is nice, handwritten note, not an email, but a handwritten note. Because it's so rare these days.
Yes.
People actually take the time to write you a handwritten note. But beyond that, if you're interviewing and you're still screening and you've got other jobs posted and somebody's calling you every day to find out if you're going to hire them, that's overkill. Very fine line.
Right. I think if you are working with a recruiter or a hiring manager that's committed to getting back to you in a certain amount of time, give them a day or two of grace and follow up at that point in time is absolutely appropriate and is showing your interest. Continuing to follow up several times beyond and on a very frequent basis works against you. And for us, an email follow-up is absolutely okay and is going to get to the right people faster. I don't think we have a strong preference there, but there are some candidates that are very enthusiastic about working for the company and will then start applying to everything. When we log into our system, when we pull up their profile, we first see the list of jobs they've applied to, and we sometimes have to scroll through 2 screens of job listings, and you see that they've applied for every function and discipline that we have. When it's a specific hiring manager looking at that person, it's hard to convince them that that person's actually interested in their job.
Now, that kind of brings us to an item that's specific to people with disabilities, and that is disclosing their disability and the potential for any reasonable accommodation that they may require in the once they get the position. How do you recommend people handle that? Because that can be a touchy subject, and people are many times concerned about revealing that during an interview. Any thoughts?
As an employer who has hired persons with disabilities before, again, honesty is always the best policy. You don't start your employment off on the right foot if you're not telling us that you need to be reasonably accommodated prior to getting the job. If we find that out after the fact, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and so it doesn't set you up for a successful, lengthy employment, which is what we're looking for from every employee that we're hiring. And also, I think it gives you the opportunity to understand whether or not this is an employer that you even want to go to work for. Because if you share that with them and then you never hear from them again, well, that's probably somebody you didn't want to work for to begin with. But to be honest with someone and then to have them say, absolutely, we'll do whatever we can to reasonably accommodate you, which is the law, I think it gives you an opportunity to really understand whether this is a company that you want to go to work for.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking before about processes that people have, and it may be different with smaller companies, but most companies have a screening interview, and then they have a face-to-face with human resources, and then something with the manager. And my experience is, by and large, during the screening interview, the only response is, yes, I can perform the duties of the job, with or without an accommodation, without going into any details about it. But then, once you've gone beyond that point, then I think it's totally realistic to be able then, you've already acknowledged the fact that, yes, I can do the job with an accommodation, that at some point further on in the process might be the most appropriate time to have that discussion, when you are a serious candidate for the position. Being fully cognizant that, no, you don't have to share everything about your condition. All that you need to really be focused on is there a reasonable accommodation that would...
And what that accommodation is, right.
That would make you successful in that job.
Do you need, are you limited site, so you need a larger monitor? We've had an employee that was missing a limb, so it was more about her safety and making sure that we had the right ergonomically appropriate things for her. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think it's because you have to prepare the employer, depending on the level of accommodation that's going to be required, that there may be things that the employer has to put in place that don't exist prior to you being hired.
As an employer, there are all kinds of situations where you need to be flexible and accommodating and maybe do a little bit more for any given employee to help them with their education or whatever. So, investments are being made in different ways to different employees. So,
well, yeah, and I would venture to say that we accommodate the vast majority of our employees that don't necessarily have a known disability.
That's right.
We're accommodating them in one sense of the word for whatever it is, whether it's a schedule or whether it's whatever that is. All of our employees are being accommodated at some level or something.
Right.
And in the interview conversations, when it gets to that place where they're asking about a specific topic or area of your experience or dimension of performing the job that is relevant to where you need an accommodation and you haven't brought it up until that point, I think that's a really good time to bring it up. If you've got an example of how you've done that with that accommodation in the past, I think it raises the concern. And the employer, if it's a situation they haven't run into, may not have the specific answer for you in that moment. But by putting that out there early, again, you're showing up as a genuine person here and interested in demonstrating how you can make this work. And you're better off doing that. If you wait till the very, very end, it comes across as if you were hiding that.
Yeah.
And in all dimensions of interviewing, disability or not, or any attribute of being qualified for the job, you want to be forthcoming and show yourself as somebody they would want to work with.
Right.
And also speaks to that self-awareness that we talked about earlier that's so critical, is that, if you are trying to hide the fact that you're disabled, is that a lack of self-awareness of what you really need to be able to function in that job? And it may or may not be, but it certainly appears that way if you're not being upfront about it.
This video was made possible by funding from the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. This video has been a production of the Association of Washington Business Institute. For more information, visit our website at www.awbinstitute.org.